Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to. I actually had quite a few custom questions regarding fall cleanup and lawn equipment and what's decent and what's not decent. So we're gonna start out with lawn equipment. It depends on the size of yard you have, or what kind of application you're doing, or what kind of obstacles you have in your yard, or if you're on a commercial property, or if you're a contractor doing lawn cutting or lawn care. It also depends on how many yards you do in a day's time as well. But we're gonna start out as a typical homeowner. Usually, a typical homeowner would have either like a riding lawnmower. Like if you live in a village or something and you have like 7/10 of an acre of grass, or just as a basic idea. Typically, usually most people would have between a 38-inch deck to a 46 6-inch with either between a 11 horse to a 19 horse, either single cylinder or twin cylinder. Some of your lawn tractors will have Briggs and Stratton on them. Some will have Kohler. Some will have Kawasaki. It depends on the manufacturer or the brand that you purchased. But most of them that you purchase, you got your typical lineup. Like if you go to Lowe's, you got your Husqvarnas, or you got Troy-Bilt, or you got the Craftsman lineup, which is actually some of it's made by Husqvarna and some was made by MTD. And Troy-Bilt is also made by MTD. But actually, even though that they're MTD built, they're really not that bad on mowers. But the thing that you also have to realize with those lawn tractors are like the 10, 11 horse models. Even though that they make plows from the snow blowers and stuff, a lot of those tractors only have stamped steel frames on them. And it's when you put if you put a plow on there, it can be done, but it's not really. You're gonna wind up bending that frame under, or if you hit something the wrong way with it. Those tractors are strictly meant for cutting grass, putting a bagger on there, if you choose to bag your clippings, or hauling a little yard cart around, or a lawn sweeper, and even a lawn roller is kind of pushing in if you choose to tow a lawn roller. But if you pull like a lawn rake around, or even like an aerator, just be careful how much weight you put on that aerator, because those tough torque transmissions that they put on a lot of those yard tractors are not meant for. And if you got a lot of hills in your yard, that might put strain on your transmission as well. So you want to go according to. And the other thing is, even your garden tractors are only rated for like an acre and a half. But if you do end up going to a dealer like a Cub Cadet dealer, or Toro, or Aaron's, or Gravely, or Hustler, or John Deere, well, actually, if you end up going to a basically a Cub dealer, you're looking at lawn tractors and that. Keep in mind, if they tell you that it's good for 3, 4, 5 acres, in all honest reality, after working with different tractors and different various ranges of lawnmowers and stuff, they're not really rated for. If you're going to be cutting 3+ acres, get yourself a diesel lawnmower. Not only do you have more power, but you got more torque. Sure, the diesel is a little more expensive, and the oil and filters are a little more expensive. The maintenance is a little bit more, but for instance, where you got 3+ acres, a diesel lawnmower is going to last you a long time. Now, there's different makes and models of them. In today's economy, you can buy, I think, As far as garden tractors and lawn tractors in today's market, pretty much, as far as I know, obviously Kubota offers a line of diesel garden tractors, lawn tractors. Some of them are gasoline powered, but if you're gonna buy a Kubota, I wouldn't Mickey Mouse around with gasoline. Go to a diesel. Not only do they have more torque, but they're also liquid cooled, so you don't have to worry about things getting too hot. But the thing you also have to keep in check with any lawnmower, it doesn't matter if it's a riding lawnmower or a zero turn or front mower tractor or even a push mower or stand on or walk behind. When you're done with them, always blow the grass off. Always take 5-10 minutes, blow the stuff off, blow the dust and dirt out of the engine, because all those, even if you get a liquid cooled lawnmower, do it anyway. It'll extend the life of it. And even if you do choose to buy something new, before you use it, wash and wax it. But don't use dish soap or anything like that. Use like car wash. Wash every crevice of it, and even wash under the deck right away. And then once it's completely dry, use some car wax. Even wax the plastic stuff. It'll keep it. It'll keep the dirt off easier in the future when you do wash it. It'll be easier to clean. And the metal stuff, what it'll do is even wax under the deck. It'll keep your deck from rusting out, and it'll keep all your metal stuff from rusting out. A lot of people don't realize that when they buy them. And every time you're done using it, always wash underneath the deck. That'll keep it. All that grass under there, what it'll do is it'll just rust out your deck. And because there's a lot of lawn tractors I run into that's, when you look on Craigslist or something, that the decks are all rusted out, and that can all be prevented just by simple maintenance procedures. And I know I'm not a small engine expert here, but it's more common sense. And typically every 50 hours, if you should change your oil and air filters and do all your grease, or use a grease gun and do your grease zerks. And because if you don't do that stuff, when metal rubs upon metal, it'll wear it out. It's like if you don't do oil changes on your car and you just let it go, and you go beyond the life expectancy of each oil change, it will destroy your engine. And then metal upon metal. Because what happens is, after, when you first get like a lawnmower or something, you put brake and oil in. After 5 or 10 hours, you're supposed to change it, because there's might be little metal shavings and stuff in there. So, and usually brake and oil is more watery than, but just do your oil changes regularly and it'll all be fine. The thing that also kind of is BS is what Briggs and Stratton and some of the other companies do is they got the policy of no need to do oil changes, just add oil as needed. Problem is, if you don't change your oil breaks down to the point where it doesn't, not doing the job it's supposed to. And I don't care what they tell you or what your dealer tells you or person in the box store. Just do your oil change every 50 hours or every spring, depending on what you do with it. So that's, and in the wintertime, drain the gas out of it, and so that your carburetor doesn't get all gummed up. And it's not so bad with the 4-cycle small engines, but the 2-cycle stuff, if you don't drain the gas out of the car, out of the carburetor, and that the hoses, it gets all gummed up, and you got to sit there in spring. Lawn boys are especially famous for this. Sometimes if your your lawn boy is more surging, one of the best things you can do is there's an exhaust port underneath the deck. You get yourself like a 2-inch dowel, and then you go up underneath there, and you just kind of you get all the carbon buildup out of there, and typically they run a lot better. What I like about the lawn boy is you don't have to worry about doing oil changes on them. You just use a regular non. Now the lawn boy, you do not want to use any gas ethanol in it. No ethanol, period. Unleaded gas is preferred with the mixture of the oil that mixture that you put in with it. Doesn't A lot of the lawn boys that you've seen in the box stores now, those are your typical 4-cycle lawn boys where they use regular gases. You put gas in the gas tank and oil in the oil reservoir. But a lot of the earlier lawn boys, you got the luxury of mixing the gas and the oil. And a lot of people hated that, and a lot of people hated the way it smelled. Honestly, I don't care. I actually like the preferably I kind of like the smell of a 2-cycle engine running. And actually, one really cool factor of the lawn boy was the way the deck was set up. It mows when you couple a 2-cycle or a lawn boy, you just get a nice cut compared to a cheap Murray or a cheap Yardman or a yard machine or one of those cheap hyper tough push mowers that you can buy at Walmart. I don't know, you just don't get the same cut or same satisfaction with a cheap push mower as you do with like a lawn boy or a Toro or even a tri-built. But then there's typically your cheap push mowers. They got your 3.5 horse Briggs. Now the Murrays weren't that bad. Some of those Murrays would run for years. But a lot of those cheap push mowers are like $149 or 129, or there's even some off-brand ones like I see at Menards. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. But it's got like a Chinese engine on there. I've never used one of those, but I've used cheap branded those cheapy push mowers where you only have one height adjustment for the wheels, and to be honest, I hate scalping the grass. I hate cutting it so low to the dirt where it looks where you don't even have grass, where it's just physical dirt. It looks dumb to mow it that short. I'd rather have when I cut my lawn, I usually cut it at like 4.5, 5.5. People think I'm kind of crazy for doing that, but and the thing is, I don't have to water my lawn either when I'm cutting. A lot of times, if there's a drought in the middle of July or August, where all my neighbors around me, they cut their lawn so short. That's just a little bitty stubble, and mine is about that long, but mine is still lush, while theirs is all brown and yellow and they grumble and complain, well, how come your lawn looks so good? And I'm like, I don't mow it so short. I mow it on the tall side. Sure, I gotta mow more often. And when I usually mow, I don't mow in the same. I don't go right around in a big circle. Usually, a lot of times when I'm cutting. So a trick I learned when I was There's a show garden I worked for about 5 years ago one summer, and when you mow your lawn, first thing you do is you make your pass on the outside. You go around 2, 3 times, and if you're like have like a street or a driveway or something, take like a bagger mower and just go around the edge so you don't get the clippings out into the street. And then, or if you got a driveway or something, or and you don't want to get clippings and stuff like that, so you just make your pass, and then if you there's some people that like to discharge their grass. That's fine and good, but it kind of slops all over. In some applications, it works. You almost got to if it's on the thick side. When you got that thick of grass and you and it's wet and you mulch it, chances are it's not going to mulch nicely. It's going to probably clump up and you're not going to get the proper airflow underneath your deck because wet grass tends to clump up under the deck, and then not only is your lawnmower struggle, but you're also putting stress on the belts. And on some tractors, you got a gearbox with a yoke and an axle. And then you're also putting the strain on the engine, and it's getting hotter and hotter. And hotter it gets, those rings inside get hot, and you could potentially wreck the cylinders, or you could blow a rod or something like that. So, and then there's some people that like to bag their grass all the time. I'm kind of a combination of, I do 3 different things. I like to bag sometimes, especially when it's thick, so you don't have all that left on the lawn. And then sometimes I like the mulch when it's dry out and it's not so thick, just to kind of recycle some of the clippings back in. Because those clippings, when you mulch it up into a fine pureed, it's basically it's like a lawn fertilizer. It's a natural fertilizer. You don't have to put fertilizer back into your lawn. And even if you do have some weeds in your lawn, the weeds also keep moisture in there, so it also keeps your lawn lush and green. I'm not exactly a show lawn type of guy, but I'm not the kind of guy that likes his grass so short that it looks goofy and ridiculous either. So and then, well, let me get back to the important part of. So once you get your passes done, then you can stripe it. There's some people that like to go up and down vertical with each other, or there's some that like to go like this as I. And then there's some people that like to really do some fancy effects in their lawn, like curves and wiggles and circles and squares, or it's quite interesting all the different patterns you can make. But usually, typically when I mow, I kind of go. One of the best pieces of advice I can give you. It's not easy to master at first. It only took me about 4 years to fully master this. But what I do is go to one corner of the field, stop for a few minutes, and I kind of line up my line of sight. So let's say you got a stake or a tree or something, or flowers, or a corner of a building or something, or a piece of sidewalk or something. What you do, stare straight ahead at the object that you're shooting for to make your perfect stripe. Don't look anywhere else. Don't look to the side. Don't look to the neighbor. Don't look to a hot woman walking by or something, or just look straight ahead at the object that you're pointing to, and then just drive. And what I mean by that is when you Once you get your first initial stripe and it's perfectly straight, then you got a basic template for how the rest of the lawn is supposed to look. It's not easy to do, I admit that. But once you get that stripe going, there's no reason why you can't follow. And you'll get compliments from your neighbors and your relatives and friends or your wife or girlfriend or parents, or they'll be like, wow, did you hire somebody to cut your lawn? I'd be like, nope, I did it all myself. And then the next time you do, once I've 1 week you mow it like this, and then the other week you'd mow it like that. And once you get it mastered, and if you really want to pull off that look, you mow in two opposite directions in within 1 week or within the same day. And you kind of got that look like you would do like at Miller Park or at Lambeau Field in Green Bay or Stadium in Chicago or Miami or New York, or that's how they mow their grass. And a lot of show gardens, that's how they mow. But they're even more pickier than I am. If you slightly mess up a stripe, it's the end of the world for them. But there's sometimes I don't do it perfectly, but when you keep things at a particular standard, eventually all the other projects you do around your house, you don't just kind of say, well, good enough. You do to the best. Not that you're trying to look like a snob or trying to look like something that you're not. Basically, what I'm getting at is when you keep your yard and house up to a certain standard, eventually it kind of shapes you into a certain responsible person when you do things a certain way, and it also kind of gives you purpose, and it kind of gives you not pride so much, but just more. Okay, enough about that. We're gonna move on. So let's say you're gonna buy a push mower or something. For instance, let's say you were looking. So basically, I don't even think John Deere makes small 20-inch or 21-inch push mowers anymore, but you got your residential line like your Craftsman, Troy-Bilt, Columbia, MTD stuff, Toro, Cub. I'm trying to think who else. And then you got your commercial stuff like Skag and Hustler and some of the other brands out there like Kubota. I don't even think Kubota does, but maybe they do. Exmark. Then you got some push mowers that you got like the 4-horse motors on them. Then you got some that got 5, some with a 6.5. Honestly, I would stick with a 6.5 horse. Because a lot of times if you got a thick grass to cut with it, it'll do a better job. It'll have more power. And if you do have a small yard that's not big enough for riding lawnmower, there's also several different variations. You got your basic walk behind that aren't self-propelled. And usually the cheap ones, the cheap of the cheap mowers are only discharged only, or if you're handy enough that you can rig up a plate, you can turn it into a mulcher. But typically they got like four small wheels on it. A little bit nicer walk behinds will have the high wheels on the back, and those are actually really nice for going uphill and stuff. It helps. You don't have the weight distribution is a lot better, in my opinion. Than that's one thing I wish Lawn Boy would have done back in the day with some of their mowers. Like your Craftsmans, you can buy them with the high wheels. Your MTD products or different line of mowers you could buy. Troy-Bilt, Cub Cadet, Sears Craftsman. Uh, I think even some of the John Deere's back in the day had them. And then there's some independent dealers that also had push mowers that had the high wheels. And if you splurge a little bit, you can get them where they mulch, or they don't have a discharge on period, or you could, and if you spend like maybe $100 more, you can get a lawnmower with a bagger on it. And then there's some that are 2-in-1 where some push mowers have the option of discharging and mulching. You just have like a baffle on the side that with a plastic discharge suit that you can put on there for that option. So, and then there's some that are 3-in-1 where you could bag, mulch, or discharge. And then if you splurge even a little bit more, you can get a push mower with a self-propelled. The cheaper end of the self-propelled is like the front wheel drive, where you got an axle in front with cogged gears. There's another gear that's got a shaft that goes up to the level of the deck, and then you have a pulley on there with a little belt that goes to another cogged pulley that's driven by the engine, and then there's a lever, basically it's like a bicycle cable that goes up by the safety bar. That you got a little switch that you can flip over, or you got a little thing that you can grab onto, or you got two bars that you hang on to that you have the option of engaging the self-propelled. Now, if you bought like a Toro or a Lawn Boy or something high end, you can some some of the more high end ones, multi-speed, or you could do it have like three different speeds, like 1, 2, 3, depending on your preference. And then there's even some that are rear wheel drive, self-propelled. And in some instances, it's nice for like going up hills and stuff like that. Because sometimes the front wheel drive, if you're going up a steep hill, sometimes it doesn't always grab right away. And there's even couple of small select models. I think Husqvarna and Ariens they have an all-wheel drive option where the front and the back. That's probably like a $400 or $500 option, I'm thinking. And then typically, if you splurge a little bit on your push mower, some of them you can upgrade you can go from like, if you don't want a Briggs & Stratton model, you can either get a Honda. And don't get me wrong, Briggs & Stratton is not all of their stuff is garbage. Some of the new stuff isn't as well built as some of the older stuff, but honestly, some of those push motors, they got Kohler engines on it. Those are nice. Some of them got Kawasaki's. Some of them got oddball Chinese ones. But the To be honest, the Hondas, I just think Honda makes a good lawn or push mower engine, in my opinion. Some of those Honda engines go for a long time on some of the newer stuff. There's the one garden, the show garden I work for. They had Lawn Boy. This is a newer style Lawn Boy push mower. There's the commercial grade version. There's a 4 cycle, but they had Hondas on there, and there's only one. Holy crap! That was quite the crack of lightning and thunder. Well, it's been raining all day, pretty much, and I had to run up to Menasha earlier this evening to get some equipment fixed. But okay, we'll get back to what we were talking about. So basically, you got your there's only one out of like 3 Lawn Boy push mowers where the motor went out on it, but when you're constantly stopping and starting those things, they do tend to wear out over time. It's crap happens in equipment. None of that stuff is meant to last forever. A lot of times with push mowers, if you abuse them and you're using them day in, day out, even if you do clean the frames and stuff on them, a lot of times the wheels will either get brittle over time and crack, and if you don't take care of your frames, a lot of times the push mowers will rot through around the edge of the motors and stuff like that. But that's only if you don't clean them and take care of them. You just abuse them or let them sit outside in the rain and the elements and the snow. There's some people that do, and then there's people that don't. But just keep in mind and even if you're not in the market for a new push mower, there's plenty of old ones out there that are well built. Like actually, one engine I forgot to discuss was Tecumseh. A lot of your Sears Craftsman push mowers from like the 70s, 60s, 70s, even 50s, 80s, 90s, 2000s used Tecumseh. And actually, half a dozen of them were okay, but there's a few that I've ran into that have had not the blue rods, but some of those. Nothing was perfect exactly, but sometimes when you buy stuff secondhand, you don't know what the person did to it or how they took care of it or what they used it for or if they abused it or didn't take care of it. So keep that in mind. And even if you come across like a secondhand Lawn Boy or something, chances are the only thing that you really have to do with it is just either get a new carburetor or get the carburetor serviced or if you can clean the carburetor yourself, that's a plus. And even in some of those old Toro push mowers, some of those antique ones just go forever. Like those from the 80s, 90s. I got a couple of 80s Toro push mowers back at my house then. It only takes like one pull to get them going and they just go. So that's always an advantage. And even the Craftsman stuff isn't bad for 80s or 90s or early 2000s. So As far as zero turns, I've used several different brands of zero turns, ranging from residential to commercial. Aaron's stuff is okay. I'm not really impressed with it. It's kind of, I think their newer stuff is all right, but some of the earlier zero turns are just kind of. The thing I hate about some of those are the drive controls on them don't always work, or not. They're not always calibrated correctly. One side's responsive, and sometimes the other side drags. And then when you're out cutting, and then sometimes you got to jerk it around to make it go the way you want it to go. And if you're using zero turns as your primary lawnmower and you're out doing other people's yards and stuff, don't mess around with crap like that. I'm not saying Aaron's is crap, but some of the earlier zero turns and even the Gravely stuff. Now, if you have like a small like a acre lawn or something, yeah, you could get away with some of those cheaper residential models, like the ZT or the X or whatever some of the models are from Aaron's and Gravely. But if you're doing commercial lawns, or you're doing a lot of lawns, or you got more than 3 acres, buy yourself something heavier duty. Or now, preferably, I kind of hate zero turns in all opinions, but I'm more into like a Buda GF 1800s, John Deere F725s, or the Husqvarna front mounted mower deck tractor, or the New Holland, or the Toro ProLine or Groundmaster 120s. Those are the kind of mowers I like. You got your deck in front, and you got a really nice free floating deck, in my opinion, with those. But they don't make them anymore because nobody wants to buy them, because they're not zero turns and they're not zippy fast. But as far as the quality of cut, I would say it doesn't get any better than those tractors. Now, Husqvarna still makes that tractor, and Toro still makes the very large models. They just don't make like the 44-inch deck or the 42-inch deck or the 48 or 52-inch anymore. And neither is John Deere. John Deere makes like the big ones where you got the deck here and then you got 2 side wings that come down to the side. They make those, and then they make ones with the 72 and 61-inch. And even Kubota, they only make the larger. So I guess in a pinch, I would still buy something like that. Not the side wings so much, because like almost like a $40,000 or $50,000 lawnmower. For that, you can buy a really nice used truck or a used car. Actually, more like a used truck, if I was going to spend that kind of cash. But as far as zero turns, a couple of years ago when the church was looking for a lawnmower, just about every dealer in the area brought out different brands and stuff. Tried out commercial, Gravely's, commercial Hustlers, John Deere's, Toro, Skeg, I think even Spartan. Heck, what else was there? I think even Dixon. I can't remember all the. And there's Wright, Walker, Grasshopper was another one. So I've used different ones. Not every model and every make that every brand had to offer, but I've had a little experience with every little different brands, and I'll be honest, each one had things I liked about them. I can't think of everything I liked about every piece, but out of all that stuff, I would have to say the front mounted tractors are I would prefer, and even like I like the Kubota garden tractors, in my opinion, and even the John Deere Yamaha diesel tractors like the 758 and the 749 and some of those. But the diesel, those are nice. You can tow a lot of stuff with them. You can put plows on them. So a beefier tractor like a 749 or 758, the plow gets mounted to the rear axle of the tractor. No, I'm thinking a wheel horse. But when you put attachments and stuff on some of those 749s and 758s and or some of between that range of the diesel, those tractors are meant for those are working garden tractors. Yeah, it is true. You do pay a lot for John Deere, but it's to actually be honest, you're actually getting something for your money. The cheaper stuff that John Deere makes, the stuff like the stuff you see at Lowe's or Home Depot, don't waste your money on that crap. If you're gonna waste your money on that, then go buy a Craftsman or a Husqvarna or a Troy-Bilt. Then, if you're gonna waste your money on a Deere from the retail store, because another thing that what they don't tell you is you buy a mower from the box store. That John Deere mower is built for the box store. The box store basically, like Lowe's or Home Depot, says, John Deere, can you make this lawn tractor for this price? And John Deere's like, sure, we can make it for that price. So what they do is they cut corners and put cheaper parts and cheaper or more plastic crap on those John Deere's and stupid safety crap on there that you really don't need, like having to push a button just to stay in reverse. That is the stupidest, most asinine design. And the thing is, you ask the dealer, what's the secret to disabling that? They go, oh, we can't tell you that. You go online, and I'm not going to tell you that either, because just look it up for yourself, and you'll find answers to it if you come across. Now, if you find that stuff at yard sales for free or something, or 25, 30 bucks or something, and you want something John Deere or something to mess around with, go ahead and buy it if you're into stuff like that. So basically, like with the high-end John Deere garden tractor, you can even put even a snowblower attachment is a decent setup. Because you want a tractor that's got a nice beefy cast iron frame on there, so when you're doing attachments like that, and you can even put and if you upgrade to the subcompact tractor like the 1025R, you can get the 3-point hitch accessory. And actually, even though the motor is kind of small for a tractor like that, but actually, it's still a decent value, in my opinion. Even though the bucket, you get like a bucket attachment for it, and so if you do buy a 1025R, get yourself the teeth for the front, and you'll have a little bit better time doing or picking up heavy dirt and stuff. And another thing that you should also have is suitcases, weights on the back of your tractor. Because if you don't do that, you're going to sit there and spin your tires and you're not going to get any traction. And another thing that what would be to your advantage is buy yourself a platform that you, or a setup that you can buy, or you can make like a okay, I can't think of what that is off the top of my head. I got that accessory. I didn't get that through John Deere. That came through Rural King. It was like 5 times cheaper than what Deere wanted for. And there's also, you can also put a regular trailer hitch on there. You just bolt it to the bottom of the frame. You get that through Amazon. So a tractor like that, you could tow like a 4x8 trailer around with no problems. And you can also use it as for plowing your garden, or you get a tiller attachment, or a rake for raking your garden. So there's, as far as equipment, now if you're like into vintage lawnmowers, your old 80s and 90s, 70s Craftsman tractors will be excellent. And the old antique Bohlins garden tractors, parts are kind of hard to get for them, but they actually built a very sturdy tractor back between the 50s and the 90s. Not one's MTD. Acquire one's MTD. Got it. It's no better than an MTD, but prior to that, those were actually decent. The old Cup Cadets from like the 50s or the 60s, 70s, and 80s were very decent tractors. Those things were built like tanks. And the wheel horses, any old antique Gravely, even like the Minneapolis Molines and the vintage John Deere's, the old Gilson tractors and the Montgomery Wards stuff wasn't bad. But honestly, one that really impresses me the most is the wheel horse tractors like the C160, C165. Them things are so darn tough. The transmissions on there just it's awesome. And you don't even need a twin cylinder engine to get a lot of power out of those tractors. Those two tractors only have 16 horse cast iron motors or long life motors on them that were made from Kohler, Wisconsin. It's just wow. It's the only disadvantage of like the newer tractors with the twin cylinder engines on them is the downside to them is they suck a lot of gas compared to the single cylinder tractors nowadays. But even back, like the twins that they built back then, they sucked gas too. You had Briggs had some models that had twins. They had Kawasaki's Kohlers that were twins. I don't know if Wisconsin engines at that time had twins available, but they might have. But I'd have to say even the Wisconsin engines weren't bad either. A lot of your Yazoo's had them, and your Bohlins garden tractors. But even your Briggs had twins from back. No, they weren't bad either. They were owning. I think Wheelhorse mainly used the Onan, like in the 516H or the 416H. Those are actually decent too for tractors. So, and as far as fall cleanup goes, it depends on what y'all do with. So when I know we're kind of jumping around here a little bit, but when I was at work for that Show Gardens, like when it came to picking up leaves and that, a lot of times what we would do is take like a handheld blower, one of those Echo blowers, and just kind of you go around and do the flower beds. You just blow all leaves out into the open area with one of those, or if you get a steel. Between Echo and steel, they make a decent gas-powered leaf blower. And then for the wide open areas where you can't get with a where you can get with a larger piece of equipment, you could either use like a walk behind blower, like a billy goat. Those are pretty good. Or you could use, depends on the application that you're doing. There's stand-on blowers you can buy, or it's similar to the stand-on mowers, but you just stand. There's a platform that you'd stand on, and you got your joysticks up on top there, and you can blow your leaves out towards the road or wherever you're going with them. But the Show Garden, we just had that walk behind, and then what we did is we just blew it to the edge of the road, and then we had a custom electric golf cart that they had a custom fabricated box to go onto the back. It was actually an interesting setup. And then they had the Billy Goat Contractor Series industrial vac, where there's two different tubes, one that would go into the back of the trailer, and then the other one would go you use on a machine. And the interesting thing is I actually had an experience on both ends of using that machine. Sometimes I was the guy that got the luxury of walking behind with a big, huge hose that was about that, and it had like a handle on there. You just suck the leaves up as you walked along. And then there's a few instances where I got to be in the driver's seat and drive along slowly while the other guy behind would operate the sucker. And actually, that really worked really well. One nice thing is you didn't have to worry about clogging up because it had like a 37 horse Vanguard engine on there. So you never had to worry about problems like that. And then in some instances, like in the Show Garden, once you got all the leaves picked up, there are certain areas where you couldn't get with that big machine. So what you would do is they had one of those walk behind commercial leaf vac systems where you just go up and down, and that worked all right too. Because a lot of when we aerated in that, first you would aerate. I had rented one of those walk behind aerators. You just go around the edges and do where you. And in the big wide open areas, they had their John Deere compact tractors bigger than the 1025R, and they had the spike attachment on the back there that pulled the plugs. So what you do is when you're aerating, you go and you do the same thing as you do mowing the lawn. You go in one direction like that. And then when you thatch or you verticut, you go the opposite direction, and then you put your fertilizer down. Usually they typically do that about 4 times a year. Not the pulling the plug so much, but just verticutting, because they use the Scott's 4-step program. And now when I first, so long story short, at the church I work for now, when I first started doing it. The only thing we had that I used for doing the cleanup was I used a Sears Craftsman LT 1500 42-inch lawn tractor for in the cemetery for getting in between the stones and riding between them, picking up all the grass clippings and the leaves, and I used that around the grounds, and then I used a crappy zero turn. They had a Gravely residential that was a real haphazard that had a bagger on there, and out in the wide open areas I used that. And then I used a wheel horse C160 with a 4x6. Actually, I think it was like a 3.5x6 trailer. And I would just pile everything into that trailer and then go dump it out in the swamp or something once I got that trailer full enough. That's how I did the first year around. And in the second year, I used that again. And the same methods again. And then the year after that, we rigged up got the leaf collection system that originally came with that tractor. Put a new motor on, because the original motor was seized, and then the repair place that took it to, we never actually got it back. So that was kind of a shame. That was a Kohler engine, but oh well. Sometimes you just kind of cut your losses and move on. So basically, the 1 year after that made things a little bit easier. We had the leaf collection system that we used on the tractor. So the 3.5x6 trailer, we went down, bought down to, I think that was either Fleet Farm Menards, bought a bunch of wafer boards, painted those all barn red, and then bought some angled iron or 90-degree angled iron, screwed it into to hold it together, and then also ran some bolts through the sides of the trailer. The trailer had sides on it and that, so just kind of bolted it, and then put 2 barn hinges on each sides, and then came up with fabricated some doors, and then the secure shut. What we did is just put 2 eye hooks or I-beams, or not I-beams, but eye hooks on either side, and just ran a bungee cord, and then put 2 utility handles on the thing, and then just kind of, and then to keep the thing shut, because once you ran a vacuum system, there was so much force, it blew the doors wide open. So I drilled the hole, just took the cordless drill. No, I don't think I even had the cordless drill at that time. I did, but not there. I just took a corded drill, drilled the hole, and then took one of those pins that you would use that came with your lawn sweeper or your trailer cart, and then just shove it down in there. And I kept it shut. For the first 2 years, that actually worked quite well. The trailer was rated for around 1,200 pounds. So, out of curiosity, took that tractor and trailer down to the co-op. That was about 500 yards from the church. Put it on a scale there, and trailer is about 900 pounds. It weighed with wet heavy grass and leaves, or shredded up leaves and stuff. The problem is, if you let that trailer get too full, it puts so much force against that pin that you almost got to use an excessive amount of force to put. And it was not a tilting trailer either. It was a fixed frame. Actually, to be completely honest, It was a Montgomery Ward's trailer that you could buy from Ward's back in the day. And I use that trailer all the time for just about every application you could possibly imagine. But what I did before I used it for an application is I repainted the trailer and then painted the bed of the trailer so that it wouldn't rot out from all the grass and wet leaves. But what I did, but there was one downside to using that method. Sure, it worked great. You get a lot in there. You didn't have to stop very often. But when it came to unloading it, it took you about half hour, either between using a pitchfork or a gardening rake or a shovel, and you had to unload it. So after a couple of years of that, Fleet Farm had a sale on one of those pull behind trailers, which is good for about 800 pounds. I think it was like $80 some. Or some was a regular like 119. It's one of those AgerFab steel yard carts. It's a lot smaller than the trailer, and you do have to stop a little more often. But the nice thing is, you got a lift gate on there, so you can just lift it out. But that you got to be careful how much you load in there too, because if you get it too heavy, you got a hell of a time. Excuse my language. Getting that out. So basically, what's nice about that was metal. Before I started using it, you just kind of washed and waxed it to keep it from rusting, and then when you slid your wet grass or your heavy grass and leaves out, it slid out a lot easier. So you just do the lift mechanism, dump it, and get back in your tractor and move a little ways, and everything just slid right out perfectly. So, and that's how we've been doing it so far with that. And then since then, Church got that Cub Cadet, but it's a great tractor. Other than so it's starting to beat the heck. But that's what happens when you go through a graveyard and that with it, and around obstacles, and sometimes you get scratched up and crap like that. But the only thing I hate about it is the bagger. Not only does the grass get plugged up before it gets up into the chute, but there's just not enough, just doesn't have enough momentum to get it up in there. And then even when it's dry and you're using it, the bagger just does not sit very good on there. It's a very poor Cub Cadet has a very poor patented bagger system, in my opinion. I hate the mesh bags because you got so much dust and crap flying around. You're completely covered in dust after using that stupid bagger. So Craftsman has, from between like the mid 90s up until late 2014, they had a very spectacular bagging system. Everything was thrusted nicely. You never had to unclog the bagger, and it worked immaculate. But Cub's bagger is good for crap. Now there's going to be some people that are going to argue with me on that, but I don't care how dry it is or how wet it is. You still got dust that's flying around, and it's just I'm not even going to go there. Plus, even the way that the mounts on the back is asinine in itself. Even Craftsman has a better setup than Cub does on their bagger. Now the rest of the tractors that Cub makes, I don't have anything much to complain about the quality of the build of their tractors for what you pay for them. But just the bagger, I gotta give I give the bagger on there a 0 out of 0. That's all I gotta say. So when it comes to like the lawn care, that what I would do is I had a 40-inch pull behind plug aerator, then I would use that Cub with a twin cylinder to drag that around, or the wheel horse with a 16 horse, or the one with the C165. And between those three tractors, it actually, the bagger works, not the bagger, I mean the aerator didn't have any problems. A lot of times what I would do is, because concrete blocks weren't enough, so I put about 400 pounds worth of fertilizer on the back and tied it down so I get better plugs. I don't recommend doing that with AgriFab pull behind stuff, because you could actually stress the welds on, or the weld points on those machines. And then a couple of years ago, that was probably about back in 17 or 18. No, I think that was 17. I was fortunate enough to go to a yard sale, and for $70, I found a Bluebird rental piece of equipment, or a Thatcher. All I had to put was new frails on her, and that thing works really nice. But due to certain things that are going on with the health right now, I haven't been able to actually get out and do that. So I haven't fertilized in the past year. So eventually we'll get back to it again. But basically, it depends on the yard, and it depends on the size of the property and the care and that of. So I hope that answered your questions. I know this got dragged down and it probably doesn't make much sense, but you try to explain things the best you can to people, and I just kind of, it's actually fun making these videos. You got viewers that want to know certain things about certain things. I'm more than glad to talk about different topics on. And yes, there are certain, I do have plans for releasing half of the videos that I've been rendering and editing. It's just a matter of time when they'll get out. And then the reason I do these live chats and streams are, one, you don't have to worry about editing the video at the end. You just kind of go, you film as you go with this layout. It works. It's not the best video quality in the world, and sometimes I make mistakes doing it. I admit that. I'm not perfect, but it's kind of a hobby if you think about it. To get into this, I don't have to do this, and I'm not obligated to do it, and I'm not forced into it. It's just kind of something fun to do, and it kind of gets you out of your shell, and you kind of think outside the box, and you can get creative doing this. So God bless everybody. Take care, and we'll see you very soon.